All right, picture this. A battlefield so massive it stretches all the way from Boston down to the Chesapeake Bay. That's the scale we're talking about with Operation Bagration.
Really?
Yeah, a Soviet offensive in World War II that often gets overshadowed by, the D-Day landings and all that. But
Right.
it was a game changer.
Oh, absolutely.
It was huge.
Yeah.
You guys asked us to really dig into this one, and we've got an awesome episode of Dan Snow's History Hit to work with here.
Right.
He interviews this historian, Jonathan Dimbleby, who really brings this whole thing to life.
Oh, I like him.
Yeah, he's a good one. So this deep dive, takes us back to 1944.
Okay.
Just a couple of weeks after D-Day, actually,
Oh, wow.
when the fate of Europe was still very much up in the air.
It's fascinating how much was happening at the same time on all these different fronts.
Yeah.
How it all played out.
Absolutely, like it's all connected.
Yeah.
So to really get Bagration, we got to rewind a bit, set the stage, right?
Okay.
Back to the situation on the Eastern Front in 1944. So Hitler's big gamble to, knock out the Soviet Union,
Right.
well, it had backfired
Yeah.
big time. And the Red Army,
Yeah.
they were pushing back with everything
Yeah.
they had.
And let's not forget how brutal the Eastern Front already was by this point.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, millions had already died on both sides.
It was just a completely different kind of war than what was happening in the West.
Absolutely.
And then right in the middle of all this, Stalin, he's not about to let the Allies in Normandy steal the show.
No way.
He decides to launch this massive counteroffensive.
Bold move.
He even names it after Pyotr Bagration, a Georgian general from way back in the Napoleonic Wars.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he was making a statement.
He was.
Stalin was Georgian himself.
Right.
He knew that name carried some weight.
Uh-huh.
It showed how important this whole operation was to him.
Definitely.
Militarily, symbolically.
Yeah.
I mean, he wanted to show the world what the Red Army could do.
Oh, he was sending a message for sure.
Yeah, he wasn't messing around. He gathered over 2 million Soviet troops.
Wow.
Think about that. 2 million.
That's incredible.
All to take on this already battered German army group center.
I mean, they were already depleted, demoralized at that point.
Yeah.
And then to face those kinds of numbers,
Right.
it's hard to even imagine.
And on top of all that, the Soviets, they were masters of deception,
Oh, yeah, the Maskirovka.
Maskirovka, exactly. Basically, they were like master illusionists.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Military trickery, think inflatable tanks,
Oh, wow.
dummy units, fake radio transmissions, the whole 9 yards.
To throw the Germans off.
Completely.
Wow.
Make them think the attack was coming from somewhere else.
And it worked.
Oh, it worked brilliantly.
Yeah.
Like they were playing chess,
Right.
And the Germans were stuck playing checkers.
Yeah. Good analogy.
Really highlights the difference in leadership too,
I see.
Like you've got Hitler, he's isolated, paranoid, micromanaging his generals, wouldn't listen to anything that didn't fit his narrative.
Oh, yeah.
But Stalin, he was actually learning to trust his experienced guys,
Really?
like Rokossovsky,
Okay.
giving them the freedom to actually, execute the plan.
Interesting.
That flexibility was key.
It makes a big difference.
Big difference, yeah. So, okay, the stage is set, the trap is laid,
Uh-huh.
and this offensive kicks off with just this earth-shattering artillery barrage.
Can you imagine?
I mean, the accounts from the Soviet soldiers who were there,
I bet.
they talk about the ground shaking, the air thick with smoke and fire, this deafening roar of the guns.
Wow.
I mean, it must have been absolutely terrifying.
Oh, yeah. Psychologically devastating.
Completely.
For the Germans who were already on the back foot,
Already stretched thin,
Yeah.
it was the beginning of the end for them.
Wow. I bet it was just wave after wave of Soviet troops.
Oh, yeah, and they were relentless.
Wow.
Surged forward, capturing all these key cities.
Oh, like which ones?
Vitebsk, Mogilev, Bobruisk,
Okay.
and Minsk.
Big cities.
Huge.
Wow.
The speed of the advance, it was mind-blowing.
Really shows how effective their planning was. And just the sheer determination.
Yeah, will to win.
It was incredible.
It really was.
So, I mean, what happened to the Germans then?
It was a blow they just couldn't recover from,
Right.
Like I was reading this account, this firsthand account from a Soviet officer, Peshnitsky.
Okay.
He was right there in the thick of it.
Wow.
And he described the opening barrage, he called it a cacophony of sound.
Yeah.
This terrifying sound that just filled the air.
Wow.
Chills, man, chills.
It's so important to remember the human cost of all this.
Oh, absolutely.
Those glimpses into the real impact.
The individual stories.
Yeah, and it wasn't just soldiers who suffered.
Right, civilians were caught in the crossfire.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
It's a reminder that war leaves scars everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah. And speaking of scars,
Yeah.
casualties.
Staggering.
How many?
Hundreds of thousands of German soldiers killed or captured.
Wow.
Entire divisions just wiped out.
Just gone.
Army Group Center, like the heart of the German army on the Eastern Front,
Yeah.
shattered.
It was a major turning point then.
Oh, absolutely. A decisive one. You know what's interesting to me
What's that?
is how different this was from what the Allies were experiencing in the West.
How so?
While they were fighting tooth and nail just to break out of Normandy,
Right.
the Soviets were making these huge gains in the East.
Right.
The pace of the war was just completely different.
Completely different scale.
Totally. And all that success on the battlefield, well, it had consequences in the political arena, too.
Of course.
Stalin, with this victory in Operation Bagration, he had a lot of leverage when it came to shaping post-war Europe.
I bet Churchill wasn't too happy about that.
Oh, not at all. Churchill, he was already super suspicious of Stalin's ambitions.
Well, yeah, Stalin had a reputation.
He did.
And they have very different visions for the future.
Oh, absolutely.
It's almost like two wars were being fought at the same time.
What do you mean?
One against the Nazis, obviously.
Right.
But then this other, more subtle one.
Okay.
Between the Western Allies and the Soviets.
For influence, for control.
Exactly. This is where the seeds of the Cold War were planted, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
The cracks were already starting to show.
Yeah, the war against a common enemy kind of masked those tensions for a while.
Right, but then those contrasting visions for post-war Europe, they became impossible to ignore.
Churchill, I mean, he was really wary of Stalin.
Oh, yeah. He just trusted him deeply.
And he was terrified of communism spreading.
Yeah.
He saw Stalin as a ruthless dictator, which...
He was. He was.
He was.
But anyway, they clashed over a lot of things.
Yeah, like what?
Especially the future Poland.
Right.
Both the Soviets and the Western Allies wanted to be the ones to liberate Poland.
How? I can see how that would cause problems.
Major friction. Yeah.
A lot at stake there.
A lot at stake.
So what happened?
Well, Churchill's distrust of Stalin, it actually led him to propose some pretty drastic measures.
Like what?
Things like Operation Unthinkable.
Operation Unthinkable. What was that?
Oh, it was a plan Churchill drew up
Okay.
to potentially launch an attack on the Soviet Union.
Wait, what?
Yeah, but after Germany was defeated. After. He was that worried about the Red Army.
Wow. So he was already thinking about the next conflict.
Oh, yeah. He saw them as a growing threat to Western Europe.
So he was willing to turn on his allies?
Pretty much. I mean, thankfully, it never went beyond the planning stages.
Yeah, thankfully.
But it really shows you how strained the relationship was becoming.
Even while they were still fighting together.
Exactly.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
It's mind-boggling.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it highlights that underlying tension.
Yeah, that lack of trust.
That suspicion that was always there.
Definitely.
And it was only going to get worse.
Right. Especially as the war was winding down and the focus shifted to what the post-war world would look like.
Exactly. It really makes you think about how we remember history, you know?
Yeah.
We hear so much about D-Day, the Western Front.
Yeah.
But Operation Bagration, even though it was massive, huge impact, it often gets overlooked.
It's a shame because the fighting on the Eastern Front, I mean, it was brutal.
Incredibly brutal.
And the sacrifices of the Soviet people, they shouldn't be forgotten.
Absolutely not.
Operation Bagration, I mean, it really shows their resilience.
Yeah.
Their determination.
For sure.
And it really shifted the balance of power in Europe, you know?
Yeah.
Paved the way for that Soviet advance toward Berlin.
Right.
And the eventual fall of the Third Reich.
It's wild to think about.
Yeah.
While the Western Allies were still battling their way through France, the Soviets were already at Germany's doorstep.
Pretty much.
Liberating huge areas, inflicting heavy losses.
Yeah.
I mean, the scale and speed of their advance, just remarkable.
It was.
But it's also kind of a cautionary tale, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Even as they were getting closer to victory, right? Those seeds of future conflict, they were already being planted.
The tensions were there.
Oh, for sure.
Between the Western Allies and the Soviets.
Simmering under the surface.
About to boil over.
And then, boom, the Cold War.
Dividing the world for decades.
It's crazy how these things connect, you know?
It's a reminder that history is rarely simple.
Right.
Victories can be bittersweet.
Yeah.
Alliances, fragile.
Absolutely.
And the consequences of even the most decisive battles.
They can echo for generations. So this deep dive into Operation Bagration, it's really shown us the complex dance of military strategy,
Right.
political maneuvering,
Yeah.
and the human cost of war.
Absolutely.
It's a part of history that deserves to be remembered, understood,
Definitely.
not just for its impact on World War II,
Right.
but for what it teaches us today.
Those lessons are still relevant,
So what does this all mean for you, our listener?
I would say.
Well, it's a reminder that history is more than just dates and battles.
Yeah, it's about people.
It's a tapestry of interconnected events,
Right.
shaped by individual choices, ideologies clashing, the struggle for power.
And those themes continue to play out today.
They do. Operation Bagration.
Yeah.
It's a powerful reminder of the complexities of war,
The consequences.
the fragility of peace.
It's a story that needs to be told and retold.
Absolutely. So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions. And hey, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next deep dive.
We'll see you then.